Yo, what's going on, boys? Welcome back to our full in-depth breakdown of UFC 328. Now, we're going to start from the first fight of the night all the way up until the last. So if you only care about the main event, skip to the end of the video. But without further ado, let's get right into it. So, the first fight of the night is going to be Clayton Carpenter versus Jose Ochoa. Now, this fight, in my opinion, is somewhat of a simple read. Carpenter is definitely a good fighter. He has good grappling. He has decent striking. He's a pretty well-rounded fighter for the flyweight division. But with that being said, I do think Ochoa has an advantage in the sense that he's also pretty well-rounded. But most importantly, he's a very physical fighter for the flyweight division. So my official prediction for this fight is going to be Ochoa via a finish. Next, we have Chimaev versus Santos. Now, this is a fight that I think is set up for Chimaev to win. I've talked about this a lot, actually, on my live streams and even on my main channel on the Juicy MMA, but I don't really think Chimaev is as good as people think. But with that being said, Santos is definitely not great either. I do think this should be a performance set up for Chimaev to win, and I do think he'll probably win via a finish, maybe in rounds 2 or 3. Next, we have Pat Sabatini versus William Gomis. Now, similarly to Chimaev, I think this is somewhat of a fight set up for Sabatini to win. Sabatini is incredible on the ground. If he can take you down, he's probably going to submit you or at the very least control you and win the fight that way. But the issue with Sabatini's game is on the feet, he doesn't have a great chin to say the least. So when he goes up against guys that are super physical, that's where he struggles. But the good thing for him going into this fight, Gomis does not have great physicality. He's pretty well rounded within his own right. He's very technical within his own right, but he doesn't have great physicality. So because of that, I do think Sabatini is going to be able to move forward, find a takedown, and find a submission. Next, we have Roman Kopylov versus Marco Tulio. Now, this is an interesting fight. Both these guys are on somewhat of a shaky point in their respective careers. Kopylov is coming off a loss in his most recent fight, and so is Tulio. Tulio's loss was significantly worse, though, I will say, than Kopylov. This is an interesting one. I do think stylistically, it probably would favor a guy like Marco Tulio, but with that being said, something is telling me that Kopylov is going to do a good job at landing that body kick, landing that head kick, that quick jab left straight, and have a lot of success on a potential shaky Marco Tulio coming off a knockout loss as bad as it was in his last fight. So I think my official prediction for this fight going into it actually is Roman Kopylov via a finish. So we'll see what happens in that fight. Not super confident in that one, but I kind of go back and forth. Next, we have Jim Miller versus Jared Gordon. Now, the fact that Jim Miller is still fighting in the UFC is crazy to me, but definitely respect to him. Jared Gordon also is a guy who is coming off a loss as well, so it's an interesting fight, but I do think Jared Gordon is still at a decent spot at his UFC career. He can strike a little bit. He can grapple pretty well. Excuse me, I do think he is a pretty good grappler overall, and I just think Jim Miller is just way too old at this point. He definitely has not looked great in some of his more recent performances, and because of that, I think Jared Gordon should win, unless he gets ran over by a car, which was what happened in his last fight, or right before going into his last fight. It's the most random story of all time, but unless something like that happens, I do think Jared Gordon should win this fight. Next, we have Grant Dawson versus Rebetsky. Now, in this fight, it's very binary, I think. If the fight stays on the feet, Rebetsky's going to find a submission, or not submission, he's going to find a knockout victory on the feet. If Grant Dawson can find takedowns, he'll probably lay and pray for 3 rounds. Now, in my opinion, I think it's super close, but I do think Rebetsky could potentially find a knockout on the feet, and I think that's where I lean at this point. Grant Dawson just does not have great striking, to say the least. He definitely does not have a great chin, to say the least, and I do think Rebetsky is going to be able to find a knockout probably within the first couple rounds. So that's my official prediction. Next, we have Joel Alvarez versus Amosov. Sorry, I can't pronounce the guy's name very well, but I do think going into this fight that Amosov is probably the lean that I have. He's a very technical fighter. He can strike a little bit, but also, most importantly, he has great grappling, and I do think he is going to show that in this fight versus Alvarez. Now, as for Alvarez, he is also somewhat well-rounded. He definitely is a finisher. He's a kill or be killed sort of fighter, but at this point, I do slightly side with Amosov going into this fight. Next, we have Ozzy Diaz versus Gauthier. Now, once again, this is a fight that is set up for Gauthier to win. This fight was actually supposed to get, was scheduled actually a couple of different times previous to this. I think it's pretty clear UFC wants a flash knockout or a highlight knockout on the resume of Gauthier. They're finally putting it back together once again. And I think it's going to be a pretty easy knockout victory, probably TKO victory or knockout victory for Gauthier over Ozzy Diaz. Ozzy, more or less, in my opinion, has nothing for Gauthier. So that's what I think there. Next, we have King Green versus Jeremy Stephens. I think King Green should win the fight. Stephens, at one point in his career, obviously was pretty good, but he's very old at this point, and so is King Green for sure. His chin's not great. Stephens does hit really hard, but at the same time, I think King Green has been looking really good as of late, actually. I think he has a lot more left in the tank as compared to Jeremy, and also King Green has a very, very awkward striking style that I think will give a lot of issues to Jeremy as well. I think it'll probably be a finish victory, actually, for King Green. But nonetheless, whether it's a decision or a finish victory, I think he wins the fight. I just think he has a lot more in the tank as compared to Stephens at this point in their respective careers. Next, we have Sean Brady versus Joaquin Buckley. Now, this is an interesting fight because it's also a pretty binary fight. The fight stays on the feet, Buckley's going to find the knockout. The fight goes to the ground, Brady's going to find a submission. But in my opinion, I do think based upon how easy it was for Kamaru Usman to find takedowns in Buckley's last fight, I do think Brady will be able to find a takedown eventually. Maybe it won't be as easy as a Kamaru Usman takedowns. Maybe Buckley did make improvements to his takedown defense, but at the same time, I don't think he's going to be able to effectively stop all of the takedowns of Sean Brady. So eventually, at one point or the other, I think Brady finds a takedown, and on the ground, differently from Kamaru Usman, Sean Brady is incredibly dangerous, and I do think he'll be able to eventually find a submission victory over Buckley. Next, we have Alexander Volkov versus Waldo Cortez Acosta. Pretty good contender fight for the heavyweight division. Now, going into this fight, my prediction is Volkov by decision. I do think he's going to do a good job at utilizing that length, fighting off the back foot, utilizing a lot of body kicks, calf kicks, maybe even head kicks, jabs, left straights, going to be very effective. And more or less, I think he's going to frustrate Waldo Cortez Acosta. I think we could see a very similar fight, actually, to Volkov's fight against Sergey Pavlovich, where Pavlovich was just very frustrated. At the end of it, Volkov was more or less doing whatever he wanted. It wasn't the most fun fight in the world, but it was a dominant performance nonetheless from Volkov. And I think we're going to see a very similar performance here against Waldo. Waldo has obviously the potential of landing a big shot. He has crazy power, it does seem. If he lands a big red straight, sure, he can knock Volkov out. But I do think Volkov's movement and his ability to utilize his reach and range is going to come out on top in the end. And I do think Volkov is going to win the fight. Next, we have Tatsuda Taira versus Joshua Van. Now, this is actually a fight that a lot of fans go back and forth on. But in my opinion, I actually have a lot of confidence in Tatsuda Taira. I think he's going to win the fight. If the fight stays on the feet, yeah, it's not going to go great for him. I admit that. But with that being said, if Taira can find a takedown, which I think he will eventually, I don't think it's going to be all that close on the ground. I think he'll be able to find a pretty quick submission victory, maybe even a ground and pound finish on the ground as well. And I personally heavily favor Tatsuda Taira going into this fight. But obviously, anything's possible. We'll see how it plays out. Should be very interesting. One additional note that I do want to add to this fight as well, though, is yes, Joshua Van is way better on the feet compared to Taira, but with that being said, the physicality is significantly in the favor of Taira. Taira can be getting landed on quite a bit, but be able to eat those shots, land one big right hand, and hurt Joshua Van. And from there, he can go immediately to a takedown and then a submission. I definitely think there's more paths to victory for Taira as compared to Van. If Van's going to win, he's going to need to stuff takedowns effectively and keep the fight on the feet for 5 rounds, which I think is a lot easier said than done. So I side with Taira, and I think he's going to win this fight via a submission. Next, we go to the main event. Khamzat Chimaev versus Sean Strickland. Obviously, a fight that a lot of fans are very interested in. Now, I've talked about this a lot. You guys probably know my opinions on this fight. But I think this fight can go in one of two ways. Either Khamzat finds a finish early within the first couple of rounds, or Strickland finds a finish late or gets a decision victory late. I think it's probably going to go in one of those two directions. As for Khamzat Chimaev, I think early, he's probably the best round one fighter probably of all time. It's going to be very difficult for Strickland to effectively stuff takedowns or really have any sort of success in those first couple rounds. And I do think he'll be able to find a finish early. But for Strickland, if somehow he could survive, rounds 3, 4, 5 is really where he can start to pull away. But as I said before, in my opinion, I think Khamzat wins this fight. I think he finds a takedown early. I think he finds a submission within the first couple rounds, maybe lands some good ground and pound shots. But as I said, my official prediction for this fight is Khamzat Chimaev via a finish in rounds 1 or 2. Honestly, more likely in round 1. But we'll see what happens in that fight as well. Definitely am very, very excited to see what happens in that main event. But those are my thoughts. Those are my full in-depth breakdowns of all the fights on UFC 328. Definitely, I'm very excited to see how the fight plays out. I will be posting on this channel on Saturday. Tomorrow, I will be posting a full instant reaction for the main event after it does happen. So be on the lookout for that as well. But until the next time, peace out, fellas.